She was sent outside to cool down. No yelling, no punishment, just rain and a locked door behind her. Inside, dinner continued. She didn't knock because she'd learned that made it worse. Her father only noticed her when he looked through the window and realized she wasn't standing anymore. The storm didn't start all at once. It gathered. First the wind, soft at the edges, testing the windows like fingers searching for a weak point. Then the rain, light at first, tapping against the glass in scattered patterns, as if unsure whether it had permission to fall harder. Inside the house, everything was warm. Lights glowed low and steady, the kind of warmth that made shadows feel safe. Coats were draped over the backs of chairs, damp sleeves forgotten already. Someone laughed from the living room. A television murmured quietly, competing with the weather outside. The girl stood near the doorway, hands folded in front of her, watching the storm through the glass. She was 8, old enough to know storms didn't ask permission, young enough to believe the house would protect her from them. "Don't stand there," her stepmother said calmly, without looking up. The girl turned. Her stepmother was by the counter, wiping a surface that was already clean. Her movements were precise, controlled, the kind of care people mistook for kindness. "You're working yourself up again," the woman added. "Go outside, get some air." The girl blinked. "It's raining." "Yes," her stepmother replied, as if confirming a helpful fact. "That's why." She crossed the room and opened the back door. Wind rushed in immediately, sharp and cold, carrying the smell of wet concrete and crushed leaves. The rain sounded louder up close, no longer gentle taps but needles against the ground. The girl hesitated at the threshold. "I'll be right here," her stepmother said, stepping aside. 5 minutes. Calm yourself." The girl stepped out. Her shoes met cold stone. Water seeped through the thin soles instantly. The air pressed against her skin, stealing warmth faster than she could understand. The door closed behind her. Not slammed, not angrily, just closed. A soft click followed, the lock settling into place. The girl turned back toward the house. Through the glass, she could see everything, the light, the warmth, the living room where the couch cushions were already claimed. Her stepmother moving easily across the floor, dry, composed. Someone said her name inside, not loudly, just enough to be heard. Her stepmother answered instead. "She's cooling off," she said, voice pleasant. "She'll come in when she's ready." The girl pressed her arms tighter against herself, rain darkening the fabric of her sweater. Water slid down her hair and into her eyes, stinging. She wiped it away quickly. Crying would only make it longer. She stood very still. Thunder rolled overhead, not close yet, but close enough to warn her it was coming. She looked back through the glass once more. From inside she must have looked small, framed by rain, barely noticeable against the dark. From where she stood, the house looked like something she was no longer allowed to touch. And as the storm thickened around her, the girl realized something quietly, without panic or sound. She wasn't outside because of the rain. She was outside because someone inside had decided she belonged there. At first, the girl counted. 5 minutes, her stepmother had said. 5 was small, manageable. She knew how long 5 minutes felt. She whispered the numbers under her breath as the rain soaked deeper into her clothes. 1, 2, 3. The wind picked up, pushing cold through her sweater and into her bones. Her fingers began to ache, the way they did when she held ice too long. She curled them into fists and pressed her hands against her thighs, trying to keep the feeling there. She reached 4. She knocked once, softly, just enough to be polite. The door opened a crack. Her stepmother stood there, dry and calm, framed by warm light. Her expression held mild disappointment, as if the girl had misunderstood something simple. "You're not calm yet," she said. The girl swallowed. "I'm trying." "That's the problem," her stepmother replied gently. "Trying looks desperate." She glanced at the girl's face, her wet hair, the way her shoulders trembled despite her effort to keep still. "Go on," she said. "You'll come in when you're ready." The door closed again. This time, the click of the lock sounded louder. The girl stood frozen for a moment, the words settling into her slowly. Ready. She didn't know what ready meant anymore. She wiped her face with the sleeve of her sweater, careful not to sniff. Sniffing counted as crying. Crying meant time reset. She stopped counting minutes. The rain came harder now, slanting sideways. It found its way down her collar, into her shoes, soaking her socks until they clung uncomfortably to her skin. She shifted her weight once, then forced herself to stop. Movement might look like agitation. From inside, the television grew louder. Someone laughed at something she couldn't hear. The sound floated out through the walls, warm and careless. She knocked again, smaller this time. The door opened wider now, just long enough for correction. "Did I say you could knock?" her stepmother asked, not unkindly. The girl shook her head. "Only when invited," the woman continued. "You don't want to interrupt people, do you?" "No," the girl whispered. "Good," her stepmother said. "Then wait." The door closed. Thunder cracked overhead, closer now. The girl flinched before she could stop herself, then pressed her lips together hard as if she could swallow the sound back down. She leaned back against the wall beside the door, feeling the vibration of the storm through the brick. The rain streaked down the glass beside her face, blurring her reflection until she barely recognized herself. She tried to slow her breathing. In, out, quiet. Her legs began to ache from standing so still. She wanted to sit just for a moment, but she didn't. Sitting might look like sulking. Sulking was a reason. The rules were never written anywhere. They lived in the pauses between words, in the tone, in the way the door opened just enough to tell her she'd failed again. Minutes passed, or maybe longer. Time felt different out here, stretched thin by cold and waiting. She stopped knocking altogether. If she didn't knock, she couldn't knock wrong. Another roll of thunder shook the sky, loud enough to make the glass vibrate. The girl squeezed her eyes shut and pressed her forehead briefly against the door, letting the solid wood ground her. Inside, someone mentioned how bad the weather was getting. Her stepmother's voice followed, light and composed. "Yes," she said, "it's cleansing." The girl opened her eyes. Rain slid down her lashes, warm against skin that had gone numb. She stood straighter, forcing herself upright again. If calm meant stillness, she would be still. If readiness meant silence, she would be silent. And if the rules kept changing, then she would stop trying to follow them, because trying was something she could do wrong. So she waited, in the rain, without knocking, without counting, without asking. The second time it happened, the rain was lighter, not a storm, not enough to justify anything dramatic, just a steady drizzle that darkened the concrete and left the air smelling sharp and metallic, the kind of weather adults described as refreshing. The girl stood at the back door when her stepmother glanced at her and sighed. "You're wound up again," she said, almost kindly. "Outside. 2 minutes this time." The girl didn't argue. She stepped into her shoes without being told. They were still damp from the night before, but she didn't react. Dampness was better than attention. She stood outside while the rain dotted her sleeves and collected at her feet. 2 minutes passed, then more. She didn't knock. She waited until the door opened on its own. Her stepmother looked at her with mild surprise, as if she'd forgotten she was there. "Oh," she said, "I suppose you're calmer now." The girl nodded quickly. "Good," her stepmother replied. "See how effective that is?" That was when the girl realized it hadn't been a punishment. It was a method. After that, being sent outside stopped feeling like something that happened because she'd done something wrong. It became something that happened because she existed too loudly, too visibly, too much. Some nights it was the porch, some nights the side yard where the light didn't quite reach. Once, when guests were over, it was the back steps, far enough away that no one would notice her through the window unless they were looking for her. The explanations were always calm. She needs space. Fresh air helps regulate emotions. I don't believe in coddling. The girl learned how to prepare. If the sky looked heavy, she folded her sweater tighter around herself before dinner. If the wind rattled the trees, she chose shoes instead of socks, even indoors. She learned how to recognize the tone in her stepmother's voice, the one that meant the door would be opening soon. She stopped flinching when it did. The first few times, she cried quietly after coming back inside, locking herself in the bathroom and pressing a towel to her face to muffle the sound. But crying didn't change anything. It only made her stepmother watch her more closely the next day. Emotional instability, she called it. So the girl adapted. She learned how to stand without shifting her weight, how to hold her shoulders still even when the cold crept in, how to keep her jaw from trembling when thunder rolled too close. She learned that knocking was dangerous. Knocking meant asking. Asking meant expectation. Expectation meant disappointment, and disappointment always showed on your face. Better to wait until the door opened. Better to be forgotten. Sometimes the rain stopped before she was allowed back in. Sometimes it didn't. Sometimes she was called inside without explanation, and sometimes she wasn't called at all, left to stand until her stepmother remembered, or until someone else needed to go outside and noticed her there. Once, a neighbor walked past the fence and slowed. The girl stared straight ahead, heart pounding, afraid the man might ask her something, afraid he might wave, afraid he might draw attention to her presence and turn her into a problem. He didn't. He kept walking. Inside the house, life continued. Dinner was served, plates were cleared, television shows ended and began again. The girl learned to listen for the scrape of chairs, the clink of silverware, the sound of her stepmother's voice drifting through the walls, light, controlled, satisfied. When she was finally allowed back inside, there was no acknowledgement of where she'd been, no towel offered, no comment made, no question asked. She was expected to step out of her wet shoes quietly, line them up neatly by the door, and continue as if nothing unusual had happened. The first time she tried to warm. Her hands near the heater, her stepmother glanced over. "Don't hover," she said. "It looks needy." The girl stepped back immediately. After that, she learned to keep her hands cold. By the end of the week, the rain didn't scare her anymore. What scared her was the sky being clear. Clear meant there would be no obvious reason. Clear meant she would have to guess. Clear meant she might be sent outside anyway, and not know why. Once, on a night with no rain at all, her stepmother opened the door and gestured toward the yard. "It's not always about weather," she said calmly. "Sometimes children need perspective." The grass was damp and cold. The air smelled like dirt and leaves. The girl stood there barefoot, staring at the dark outline of the fence, feeling the chill seep up through her feet. She didn't ask how long. She didn't ask what she'd done. She just stood. Later, lying in bed, she pressed her cold toes against the warm sheet and waited for the feeling to come back. It took longer than it should have. She watched the ceiling until sleep found her, not because she was tired, but because she'd learned sleep was the fastest way to skip forward in time. By then, being outside wasn't something she feared. It was something she prepared for. She learned to recognize the warning signs, the slight tightening of her stepmother's smile, the way her eyes flicked toward the door, the quiet sigh that came just before a decision was made. When she felt those signs, she moved closer to the back hallway on her own. Sometimes she even opened the door before being told, stepping out into the air without waiting for permission. Her stepmother noticed. "Good," she said once, nodding approvingly. "You're learning." The girl nodded back, though she wasn't sure what she was learning anymore. She knew how to stand in rain without crying. She knew how to stay still when her skin burned with cold. She knew how to be visible without being seen. And most importantly, she knew this. If she didn't knock, if she didn't ask, if she didn't move, then she couldn't do it wrong. So she stood outside when she was told, and sometimes when she wasn't, waiting, as if the door might forget she was there, just like everyone else inside already had. Rosa noticed the shoes before she noticed the girl. They were lined up too neatly by the back door, small, scuffed at the toes, always positioned with their heels perfectly against the baseboard, as if a crooked angle might invite punishment. Rosa saw them every morning when she came down to start the coffee, when the house still felt like a sleeping animal, quiet, clean, full of rules that hadn't been spoken yet. At first she thought nothing of it. Children left shoes in odd places. Children were messy. Children forgot. But Lily didn't forget. Lily was careful in a way that wasn't natural. She moved like someone who had learned the shape of danger by bumping into it too many times. Rosa saw it in the way the girl walked through the kitchen doorway. Soft steps, shoulders slightly rounded, hands always folded in front of her body as if she was trying to take up less space. Rosa saw it in the way Lily's eyes flicked toward her stepmother whenever a sound happened. A spoon falling into a sink, a cabinet closing too firmly, the kettle's whistle rising half a note too high. And then, one morning, Rosa picked up the shoes. They were damp, not freshly splashed, not the kind of damp a child got from stepping in a puddle on the way to school. This dampness clung deeper, soaked into the lining. The smell of wet concrete and cold air rose from them when Rosa lifted them near the light. Rosa frowned and placed them on the radiator in the laundry room, thinking perhaps Lily had been careless. Perhaps she'd run through the grass. Then she saw Lily later, sitting at the kitchen table with her hands wrapped around a mug of warm water Rosa had poured for her. The child wasn't drinking it. She was just holding it, letting the heat touch her fingers. Lily's sleeves were too long. Her sweater hung loosely from her shoulders, the fabric stretched thin at the cuffs where she had chewed at it. Her hair looked dry, but her neck, just under the collar, had faint redness, the kind that appeared when cold had kissed skin too long. Rosa had seen that kind of redness before, not in children, in people who waited outside. "Are you cold?" Rosa asked quietly. Lily shook her head too fast. "No." Rosa didn't push. She knew that speed. That kind of answer wasn't honesty. It was self-defense. Later that evening, Rosa was in the kitchen rinsing vegetables when she heard the back door open. Not loudly, just the familiar sound of hinges moving, air shifting. She glanced up. The house lights were already on. The dining room glowed warmly down the hall. Voices traveled through the air, soft conversation, the pleasant hum of a household preparing for dinner. Lily stood at the doorway. Her stepmother was behind her, one hand resting lightly on the girl's shoulder, guiding her the way you guided a guest toward a coat rack. "You're overstimulated," the woman said calmly. "Outside. Let the weather settle you." Lily didn't argue. She stepped out. The door closed again with that same quiet finality. Rosa stood frozen at the sink, water still running over her hands. Outside, the sky was a sheet of dark gray. Rain fell in slanted lines. Wind shook the trees hard enough that branches scraped against the fence. Rosa moved to the kitchen window without thinking. The glass was slightly fogged from the warmth inside. She wiped a circle, clear with the edge of her sleeve, and looked out. Lily stood on the back step, small, thin, arms pulled tight across her chest. She wasn't moving, she wasn't crying, she wasn't even looking at the sky. Her eyes were fixed on the door, as if she could will it open by staring at it hard enough. Rain soaked her sweater almost immediately. It darkened the fabric and made it cling to her arms. Her hair began to drip. Rosa's mouth went dry. She glanced toward the hallway. The stepmother's voice drifted in from the dining room, light, cheerful, as if she had just done something helpful. Plates were being set down. Someone laughed. Rosa looked back at Lily. The child hadn't moved. A minute passed, then another. Rosa's hands clenched into fists at her sides. She wanted to open the door. She wanted to pull the girl inside, wrap her in a towel, tell her this wasn't normal, tell her she wasn't wrong for wanting warmth. But Rosa also knew the rules of this house. She had watched the stepmother smile politely while cutting people down without ever raising her voice. She had seen the way she corrected staff with the same calm she used to compliment guests. In this house, cruelty never looked like anger. It looked like management. Rosa waited, counting without meaning to. 1 minute, 2, 3. The rain grew heavier. Lily shifted her weight once, just slightly, as if her legs were starting to fail. She pressed her palms against her thighs, trying to steady herself. Then she stopped again, forcing herself still. Rosa's throat tightened. Children didn't stand like that. Children moved. Children complained. Children cried when they were cold. Lily was doing none of those things. She was standing as if movement might make something worse. Rosa took a step toward the back door. Then she stopped, because she heard the stepmother's heels in the hallway. Rosa returned to the sink quickly, pretending to rinse something that didn't need rinsing. She felt her heart pounding as the stepmother stepped into the kitchen. The woman glanced around casually, eyes sharp even when her tone wasn't. "Have you seen Lily?" she asked, as if she had genuinely forgotten. Rosa swallowed. "She stepped out for a moment," she said carefully. "Good," the stepmother replied. "She needs that sometimes. She gets emotional. It's better for everyone." Rosa nodded because nodding ended conversations. Her stepmother poured herself a glass of water, took one slow sip, then set it down. She looked toward the window, but not with concern, more like checking the weather report. "It's calming," she said, almost pleasantly. "Rain puts things in perspective." Then she left. Rosa waited until the sound of her heels faded. Only then did she move again. She went back to the window. Lily was still there, soaked through now, shoulders trembling in small, controlled shivers. She had tucked her hands under her arms, trying to trap what little heat she had left. Rosa watched the child's lips part slightly, as if she was whispering something to herself. Counting, Rosa realized. The way someone counted when they were trying not to panic. Rosa's chest felt tight, like she couldn't pull enough air in. She had been working in this house for years. She had seen arguments, seen cold marriages, seen people ignore each other out of convenience. But this quiet exclusion, this controlled exposure, felt different. It felt intentional. It felt practiced. Rosa started noticing more after that. She noticed Lily's socks hanging in the laundry basket, stiff from drying too quickly, still smelling faintly of rain. She noticed towels missing, small ones taken from the bathroom and returned later folded too neatly, as if Lily was trying to erase evidence that she needed them. She noticed Lily standing near vents sometimes, not directly in front of them, never openly seeking warmth, just close enough that a little heat touched her sleeves. And she noticed something else. Lily never mentioned being outside, not once. Even when Rosa left a cup of warm milk on the counter and Lily drank it quickly, eyes scanning the hallway for footsteps, the girl didn't say thank you. Not because she wasn't grateful, because gratitude was a kind of attention. Attention was dangerous. One night, Rosa found Lily in the pantry, reaching for a small roll of bread. The girl froze when she saw Rosa, eyes wide like she'd been caught stealing. Rosa lifted a finger to her lips. "Eat," she whispered. Lily hesitated. "I'm not supposed to," she murmured. The words hit Rosa like a slap. "Who told you that?" Rosa asked, though she already knew. Lily didn't answer. She didn't need to. Rosa placed the bread in the child's hands and closed the pantry door gently behind her, leaving it cracked just enough for Lily to slip out. That night, as Rosa washed dishes, she listened to the storm outside and imagined Lily standing in it again, silent, waiting, learning to turn cold into something she deserved. Rosa found herself counting more than minutes now. She counted storms, she counted wet shoes, she counted days, and every time she did, the same thought pressed harder against her ribs, heavier than fear, heavier than her need to keep this job. If no one stopped this, the girl would grow up thinking warmth was a reward, and punishment was simply the way love was given in this house. That was when Rosa understood something she hadn't wanted to name before. This wasn't a child being disciplined. This was a child being trained to disappear, quietly, efficiently, so the house could stay perfect. The first time Rosa heard the word discipline used that way, it almost sounded reasonable. They were sitting in the dining room that evening, the storm gone now, the house returned to its careful quiet. Candles burned low on the table, more for atmosphere than need. The girl stood near the doorway, hands folded, waiting to be noticed. Her stepmother didn't look at her right away. "Sit," she said instead, to no one in particular. The girl took a step forward, not toward a chair, she had learned better than that, but toward the wall, where she could stand without being in the way. She lowered her eyes and waited. Her stepmother finally turned, assessing her with the same neutral expression she used when correcting a misaligned picture frame. "You're still unsettled," she said. "I can see it in your posture." The girl straightened immediately, forcing her shoulders back, lifting her chin just enough to look attentive without looking defiant. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Her stepmother waved a hand lightly. "This isn't about apologies. It's about regulation." She said the word as if it were something fragile, something she was carefully protecting. "Children feel too much," she continued calmly. "They don't know how to manage it. If you rush to comfort them every time they're uncomfortable, you teach them dependence." The girl nodded even though she didn't fully understand. Nodding felt safer than asking. "That's why I use the outdoors," her stepmother went on. "Nature has a way of correcting excess emotion. It grounds them. Grounds them." The girl thought of the cold concrete under her feet, the way the rain had soaked through her shoes until her toes felt like they weren't hers anymore. She thought of the way her legs had trembled even after she'd been allowed back inside. She kept those thoughts to herself. Rosa stood in the kitchen doorway, pretending to wipe down the counter, listening. "I'm not cruel," the woman added, turning slightly so her voice carried just enough to reach the hallway. "I'm consistent. There's a difference." She took a sip of water, composed. "Children need boundaries. They need to learn that comfort isn't automatic." The girl swallowed. Comfort wasn't automatic. Later that week, guests came over. It was the kind of visit that required effort. Fresh flowers on the table, plates warmed, music low and tasteful. The stepmother moved through the house with practiced grace, greeting everyone with warmth that felt rehearsed but convincing. "This place is beautiful," one woman said, glancing around the living room. "Thank you," the stepmother replied, smiling. "Structure makes all the difference." The girl hovered near the hallway, half hidden behind a wall, listening. "She's very disciplined," another guest remarked, noticing how quiet the child was. "You hardly know she's there." The stepmother laughed softly. "That's intentional. Children don't need to dominate space, they need to learn restraint." Rosa felt her hands tighten around the dish towel. The girl's eyes flicked toward her stepmother, then away again. She shifted her weight, careful not to make a sound. One of the guests leaned forward. "Doesn't she ever get restless?" "Oh, she does," the stepmother said smoothly. "But we have ways of managing that." She glanced toward the back door for just a fraction of a second, so quick most people wouldn't notice. Rosa did. The girl followed the glance instinctively. Her stomach tightened. That night, after the guests left and the house settled back into itself, the girl stood in the kitchen while her stepmother dried her hands on a towel. "Can I stay inside tonight?" the girl asked quietly. The words were barely there. Almost not words at all. Her stepmother paused. She didn't turn around right away. She folded the towel carefully, aligning the edges with deliberate precision, as if she needed the moment to decide how to phrase her response. "Why would you ask that?" she said at last. The girl stared at the floor. I was good today." Her stepmother turned then, her expression unreadable. "Good doesn't mean ready," she said calmly. "And asking tells me you're still focused on yourself." The girl's throat tightened. "Stop," her stepmother interrupted gently. "Do you hear yourself?" The girl froze. "You're asking for comfort," the woman continued. "That means you haven't learned the lesson yet." The girl's hands curled into the hem of her sweater. "When will I be ready?" she asked, the question slipping out before she could stop it. Her stepmother studied her for a long moment, then she smiled, not warmly, not cruelly, but with the quiet satisfaction of someone explaining something obvious. "When you stop asking," she said. The words landed heavier than any shouting could have. The girl nodded slowly. "Yes, ma'am." That night the rain returned. Not a storm, just a steady, persistent fall. The stepmother didn't need much of a reason. "You're tense again," she said. "Outside. 5 minutes." The girl reached for her shoes. Rosa watched from the kitchen as the child stepped out into the rain without hesitation, pulling the door closed behind her gently, as if she were the one responsible for maintaining order. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Rosa glanced at the clock, then toward the hallway, then back at the door. She took a step forward, then stopped herself. The stepmother's presence in the house felt constant, even when she wasn't in the room. When the door finally opened, the girl came in quietly, water dripping from her sleeves onto the floor. Her stepmother glanced down at the puddle forming beneath her. "Careful," she said mildly. "Mess shows lack of control." "I'm sorry," the girl whispered automatically. Her stepmother nodded. "Go change." Upstairs, alone in her room, the girl peeled off her wet clothes and wrapped herself in a towel. She sat on the edge of the bed and waited for the shaking to stop. She didn't cry. Crying meant she hadn't learned. She thought about the question she had asked earlier. "When will I be ready?" And the answer she'd been given. "When you stop asking." The rule settled into her slowly, reshaping itself inside her chest. Asking was the problem. Wanting was the problem. Needing was the problem. If she wanted to stay inside, she had to stop wanting to. If she wanted warmth, she had to stop noticing the cold. If she wanted to be included, she had to stop reaching for it. Downstairs, Rosa dried the last plate and set it carefully in the cupboard. She stood there for a long moment afterward, hands resting on the counter, listening to the rain tap against the windows. She replayed the stepmother's words in her head. Nature corrects excess emotion. Comfort isn't automatic when you stop asking. Rosa felt something harden in her chest because she was beginning to understand the shape of this cruelty now. Not loud, not chaotic, not something that left marks you could point to. It was a lesson taught patiently, night after night, a lesson designed to make a child believe that needing warmth was a failure, and that standing alone in the rain was simply part of learning how to behave. The warning came in the afternoon, spoken casually while the radio played low in the kitchen. "Severe weather expected this evening," the voice said. "Heavy rain, high winds." Rosa glanced toward the window. The sky had already darkened into that heavy gray that pressed down on everything. She thought of Lily immediately. The stepmother heard it too. "Well," she said lightly, setting her cup down, "no one will be going outside tonight. It's dangerous." The words landed like a gift. Lily froze where she stood near the doorway, hands folded, shoes already lined up neatly by the wall. She didn't smile. She didn't react at all, not outwardly. But something shifted in her posture, just enough that Rosa noticed. Inside her chest, hope lifted carefully, like something fragile she wasn't sure she was allowed to touch. She spent the rest of the day preparing. Not excited. Careful. She folded her sweater and placed it on the chair in her room. She dried her shoes by the vent, turning them once so they wouldn't stay damp. She washed her hands twice before dinner, scrubbing a little longer than necessary just in case. If tonight was different, she didn't want to be the reason it changed back. By evening, the rain had started. It came down fast, pounding against the roof, streaking the windows until the world outside blurred into motion. Wind rattled the fence. Thunder rolled low and long, close enough to feel. The girl stood in the hallway, watching the storm through the glass. Inside, everything felt warmer than usual. Lights glowed, plates were set. Rosa brought food to the table, the steam rising rich and comforting. The girl stayed where she was, waiting to be told what to do. She wasn't told. The stepmother moved past her without a glance, adjusting a napkin, straightening a chair. The girl followed her with her eyes, heart beating faster now. She took one small step forward. "Careful," her stepmother said without looking. "Don't rush." The girl stopped immediately. Dinner began without ceremony. Chairs scraped softly against the floor. Someone commented on the weather. The girl stayed standing, pressed against the wall, trying not to sway. She told herself to be patient. This was the part where she waited. A few minutes passed. Then, as Rosa set down a bowl, the girl shifted her weight without thinking. Her elbow brushed the edge of the counter. A glass tipped. It didn't shatter. It didn't spill far. Just a small splash of water across the surface. The sound was enough. The room went quiet for half a second. The stepmother turned slowly. "There," she said calmly. "That's what I mean." The girl's heart dropped. "I'm sorry," she whispered, the words automatic. Her stepmother sighed, almost regretful. "You're still agitated." She walked to the back door and opened it. Rain rushed in, loud and cold. "Outside," she said. 5 minutes, storm or not." The girl hesitated for less than a second. Then she reached for her shoes. Rosa's hands stilled on the table. "It's really coming down," she said carefully. The stepmother glanced at her. "That's not your concern." The girl stepped outside. The door closed. The lock clicked. Rain hit her immediately, harder than before, soaking through her sweater in seconds. Wind pushed against her, sharp and unrelenting. Thunder cracked overhead, close enough that she flinched despite herself. She pressed her back against the wall beside the door, grounding herself the way she'd learned. 5 minutes. She could do 5 minutes. Inside, conversation resumed. Plates clinked. Someone laughed, a little too loudly, as if to fill the space that had briefly gone quiet. The girl stared at the glass. From where she stood, she could see the table clearly now. The warm light, the movement of hands, Rosa passing behind the chairs. No one looked toward the door. The rain soaked her sleeves until they clung heavy against her arms. Water slid down her hair and into her eyes. She wiped it away quickly, afraid of what tears might look like through the glass. Thunder rolled again. She counted slowly in her head. Not minutes, breaths. Her legs began to tremble. She adjusted her stance once, then forced herself still. Movement might look like agitation. Agitation reset the timer. She remembered that. Her shoes filled with water. The cold crept upward, dull at first, then sharp enough to make her teeth chatter. She pressed her lips together hard to stop the sound. 5 minutes passed, then more. She didn't knock. She knew better. Inside, the storm became something people talked about. "Sounds awful out there," someone said. "Yes," her stepmother replied easily, "but it clears the air." The girl's head began to feel light. The world tilted slightly, then steadied. She pressed her palm flat against the glass, leaving a faint print that the rain immediately washed away. Her knees weakened. She slid down the wall slowly, careful even now not to make noise, until she was sitting on the wet ground with her back against the door. Rain soaked into her clothes completely. Her breathing grew shallow. She tried to stand. Her legs didn't respond. Inside, someone reached for another serving. Outside, the girl rested her forehead briefly against the door, eyes closing as the sound of the storm filled her ears. The warmth was right there, just inches away, and for the first time since she'd learned how to be still, how to be quiet, how to wait, her body stopped listening to the rules. The rain kept coming, not in waves, not dramatically, just steady, relentless, like something that had decided it wasn't leaving until it had finished what it came to do. Water pooled around the girl's shoes, then soaked through them completely, numbing her feet until she couldn't feel where the ground ended and her body began. She sat with her back against the door, knees drawn in, arms wrapped around herself as tightly as she could manage. The wall was slick and cold. The wood of the door pressed into her shoulder blades, solid but unyielding, there but not opening. She tried to stand again. Her hands slid against the wet surface as she pushed, fingers weak, uncooperative. For a moment she thought she might make it. Her knees straightened halfway. Then the strength simply drained out of her, as if it had been turned off somewhere inside her. She slid back down, breathing harder now, in through her nose, out through her mouth. That usually worked. The storm answered with thunder, closer than before. The sound rolled over her, vibrating through the door and into her bones. She flinched despite herself, a small, involuntary movement that made her chest tighten with fear. "Don't reset it," she told herself, even though there was no timer anymore. "Don't make it worse." Rain ran down her face, warm for a second before the cold returned. She blinked slowly, trying to keep her eyes open, but the world felt fuzzy around the edges, like it was pulling away from her bit by bit. Inside, she could hear voices, muted by the door, softened by glass and distance, but still there. The rhythm of conversation continued uninterrupted. Laughter rose, then fell. A chair scraped back. Someone commented on the food. The sound didn't make her angry, it made her tired. Her stomach cramped sharply, folding in on itself. She pressed a hand against it and sucked in a shallow breath, trying to ride the pain the way she'd learned to ride hunger, quietly, without complaint. Her head felt heavy. She leaned it back against the door and closed her eyes just for a moment, telling herself she was only resting them. The darkness behind her lids pulsed faintly, not black but gray, like the sky had followed her inside. She opened her eyes again. The glass in front of her was streaked with rain, the view inside warped and blurred, light smeared into long, trembling shapes. She thought she saw Rosa move past the table, then lost her again. Her fingers had gone stiff. She tried to curl them, but they moved slowly, as if they belonged to someone else. She tucked them under her arms again, searching for warmth that wasn't there. Her breathing grew shallower. She noticed that, distantly, the way someone noticed a sound fading out at the end of a song. Each breath felt like more work than the last. The cold wasn't sharp anymore. It was everywhere, flat, heavy, pressing. She tilted her head to the side, cheek resting against the door. The wood was warm. That surprised her. Just a little warmth, leaking through from the other side. It felt almost kind. She pressed her cheek there, eyes fluttering closed again despite herself. Just a minute, she thought, just until I can stand. The world tipped. Her stomach lurched suddenly, violently, and she barely had time to turn her head before nausea rose up, sharp and unstoppable. She gagged, retching weakly onto the ground beside her, her body folding in on itself as if trying to disappear entirely. The sound carried. Small, broken, nothing like the dramatic noises adults made when they were sick. She froze afterward, heart racing, waiting for the door to open. It didn't. Rain filled the silence instead. Her vision narrowed further now, the edges dimming as if someone were slowly turning down the lights. A faint ringing filled her ears, high and thin, cutting. Through the sound of the storm, she tried to call out. Her throat worked, but no sound came. She swallowed and tried again, forcing air up through her chest, but the effort made her dizzy. The ringing grew louder. Her head lolled forward. For a moment she wondered if this was what calm felt like. The shaking had stopped. The cold didn't hurt anymore. Everything felt distant, like she was watching it happen from far away. She thought of the house, not the whole thing, just the door, the light behind it, the warmth pressed into the wood. She imagined it opening, imagined stepping inside, imagined someone wrapping a towel around her shoulders and saying her name like it mattered. The image slipped away before she could hold on to it. Her eyes closed again, this time without permission. Inside, a fork clinked against a plate. Someone laughed. Then, faintly, as if from another room entirely, Rosa's voice cut through the noise. "Lily?" The sound didn't reach her all at once. It arrived in pieces, pulled apart by rain and distance. Lily's name sounded unfamiliar, like something she hadn't used in a while. Rosa again, louder this time. The door handle rattled. Lily's body responded before her mind did, a small shudder running through her as the vibrations passed through the wood. Her eyelids fluttered, but she couldn't lift them. The strength wasn't there. The door opened. Cold air rushed in, sharper now, mixing with warmth from inside. Hands reached for her, stronger hands, urgent hands, and wrapped around her shoulders, pulling her upright. "Oh, sweetheart," Rosa whispered, the words breaking as they left her mouth. "Oh, no." Lily sagged against her, too heavy and too light at the same time. Her head lolled forward, then rested weakly against Rosa's chest. Rosa felt the soaked fabric, the trembling that had finally broken free, the way the child's breathing fluttered unevenly against her apron. Inside the house, voices paused. "What's all that noise?" the stepmother asked, irritation sharpening her tone. Rosa didn't answer. She scooped Lily up, cradling her carefully, one arm under her knees, the other around her back. Lily's eyes opened briefly, unfocused, her gaze drifting past Rosa's shoulder toward the light inside. I waited," she whispered, the words barely audible. "I didn't knock." Rosa's throat closed. "I know," she said, holding her tighter. "I know." Behind them, the storm kept falling, but something else had broken now, something quieter, something final. The girl had followed every rule. She had been still, she had been silent, she had been ready, and her body had given up anyway. Rosa didn't take Lily to the kitchen. She didn't take her upstairs. She carried her straight into the laundry room, the closest place with warmth and a door she could close without questions. She laid the girl gently on the bench beside the dryer, wrapped a towel around her shoulders, then another, pressing the fabric firmly against her small body as if pressure alone could keep her anchored. Lily was shaking now, deep involuntary tremors that rattled through her frame. Rosa knelt in front of her and rubbed her arms briskly, speaking low and steady. "Stay with me," she murmured. "You're inside now, you're inside." Lily's eyes fluttered open and closed, unfocused. "Did I do it right?" she whispered. The question hollowed Rosa out. "Yes," Rosa said immediately, her voice cracking despite herself. "You did everything right." Behind the laundry room door, the house continued as if nothing had happened. Cutlery clinked, chairs shifted, someone cleared their throat. The stepmother's voice drifted down the hallway. "What's taking so long?" Rosa ignored it. She reached for her phone. Her hands were shaking so badly she nearly dropped it. She steadied them against her apron and looked at Lily again, at the gray tinge to her skin, the way her lips trembled when she tried to speak, the way her body no longer seemed capable of holding itself together. This wasn't something you waited out. Rosa stood and locked the laundry room door. Then she did something she had never done before. She lifted the phone and took a picture. Through the small window in the door, the light from the house spilled across Lily's soaked clothes, her bare feet, the towel wrapped too tightly around her shoulders. The timestamp glowed clearly at the bottom of the screen. Rosa took another photo, then one more. She didn't know why she was doing it, only that something in her understood this moment would be questioned later, softened, explained away. Proof mattered. Silence protected the wrong people. She slid the phone into her pocket and crossed the room to the cabinet where household papers were kept. The stepmother liked everything organized: insurance documents, school forms, neatly labeled folders. Rosa pulled them out quickly now, flipping until she found what she'd seen once before and never touched. A letter, heavier paper, clean printing, a name written with certainty. Michael Grant. Rosa stared at it for a second longer than necessary. Then she picked up the phone again and dialed. The ring felt too loud in the quiet room, once, Twice. On the third ring, a man answered. Grant. Rosa swallowed. Mr. Grant, she said, my name is Rosa. I work in your home. Silence, not confusion, not impatience, attention. My daughter, he said slowly. Yes, Rosa replied. She's outside, or she was. She collapsed. Another pause, shorter this time. Where is she now? Inside, Rosa said quickly. With me, she's cold, she couldn't stand. Rosa heard movement on the other end, fabric shifting, a chair scraping back. How long has this been happening? He asked. Rosa closed her eyes. Longer than it should have, she said. She's been sent outside, during rain. Tonight was bad. Silence again. Then, controlled and sharp. Is she safe right now? Rosa hesitated. Not if she stays here. The words felt dangerous even as she said them. Listen to me carefully, he said. Do not let anyone move her. Do not leave her alone. I'm coming home. Rosa's breath caught. Sir, I will be there before the storm ends, he said. If what you're telling me is true. He stopped himself. Then, thank you for calling. The line went dead. Rosa stood there for a moment, phone still pressed to her ear, heart pounding so hard she could hear it. Behind her, Lily stirred. Rosa, she whispered. I'm here, Rosa said, kneeling again, brushing wet hair back from Lily's face. You're safe. Lily frowned weakly. Is it over? Rosa looked at the door. No, she said, but it's changing. Michael Grant arrived in the storm. His car cut through the rain like it didn't belong there, tires hissing against the flooded driveway. He didn't park carefully. He didn't turn the engine off right away. He sat for a moment, hands gripping the steering wheel, listening. Rain hammered the windshield. Wind bent the trees along the fence. The house stood bright and calm behind the glass, warm lights glowing like nothing inside could possibly be wrong. Michael opened the car door and stepped out into the rain. He didn't run. He walked, fast, deliberate, his coat darkening immediately as water soaked through it. As he reached the front steps, laughter drifted faintly through the walls. That was when he stopped, not at the door, at the window. The living room was fully visible from where he stood, the table set, plates half finished, people seated comfortably, leaning back in their chairs. And just beyond the glass of the back door, his daughter. She wasn't standing. She was slumped on the ground near the door, wrapped in towels too thin to matter, her hair plastered to her face, her small body folded inward like she was trying to disappear. For a second, Michael didn't move. His mind rejected what his eyes were showing him. The scene felt wrong in a way that didn't allow for explanation or delay. Then, his body caught up. He crossed the remaining distance in 3 strides and pulled the front door open. The sound cut through the room. Conversation stopped mid-word. Forks. Frozen hands. His wife turned first, surprise flashing across her face before she smoothed it away. Michael, she said, recovering quickly. You're early. He didn't answer. He walked straight through the living room, shoes leaving wet marks on the floor, his gaze fixed ahead. What's going on? Someone asked. Michael reached the back door and yanked it open. Cold air rushed in. Rain followed. Rosa looked up from where she knelt beside Lily. Their eyes met. She's here, Rosa said quietly. Michael dropped to his knees beside his daughter. He didn't touch her at first. He looked, really looked, at her face, her lips tinged pale, the way her chest rose unevenly beneath the towels. Lily, he said softly. Her eyes opened halfway. Daddy? She whispered, uncertain. I'm here, he said. I see you. Behind him, his wife stepped closer. Michael, this is unnecessary. She was just cooling down. He turned. The look he gave her wasn't anger. It was recognition. This, he said calmly, ends now. No one spoke. Rain drummed against the house. Michael lifted Lily carefully into his arms, shielding her with his body as he stood. We're leaving, he said, and we're calling a doctor. His wife opened her mouth to argue. Michael didn't wait to hear it. From the doorway, the house watched him go, silent, exposed, stripped of the story it had been telling itself. Through the window, the chair sat empty. But this time, it wasn't unnoticed. The doctor arrived before the storm eased, not because anyone inside the house called in a panic, but because Michael Grant did not wait to be told what was appropriate. He stood in the entryway with his phone pressed to his ear, voice low and exact, describing symptoms without emotion, the way men did when fear had already hardened into decision. "My daughter collapsed after prolonged exposure to cold and rain," he said. "She's weak. Shivering hasn't stopped. I need someone here now." He ended the call before reassurance could be offered. Lily lay wrapped in blankets on the couch, her small body curled inward, Rosa seated beside her with one hand resting lightly against her back. Lily's breathing was shallow but steady. Her eyes fluttered open occasionally, searching the room as if trying to understand how everything had changed so quickly. Michael knelt beside her. "I'm here," he said again, quieter this time. "You're not alone." She nodded faintly, her fingers curling weakly into the sleeve of his coat. Behind them, the house felt different. The warmth that once felt comforting now seemed exposed, too bright, as if the lights were revealing more than they hid. The guests had gone quiet. Coats gathered without. Conversation. Apologies murmured that didn't quite know who they were for. Michael's wife stood near the dining room doorway, arms crossed tightly, her composure thinning at the edges. "You're making a scene," she said under her breath. "This didn't need to escalate." Michael didn't turn around. "It escalated when she stopped being able to stand," he replied. The doctor arrived minutes later, rain dripping from his coat as he stepped inside. He knelt immediately, checking Lily's pulse, her temperature, the color of her lips. "When did she come in from outside?" he asked. Michael looked at his wife. Rosa answered instead. "Too long," she said. The doctor's expression tightened. He listened to Lily's chest, frowned slightly, then looked up. "This kind of exposure can be dangerous," he said, "especially repeated exposure. Hypothermia doesn't always look dramatic. It looks like this." Michael nodded once. "She needs monitoring," the doctor continued. "Fluids, warmth. This isn't something that happens from one mistake." Silence filled the room. The stepmother laughed sharply. "That's absurd. She goes outside to calm down. Children exaggerate." The doctor didn't look at her. "Medical data doesn't exaggerate." Michael straightened. "We're going to the hospital," he said. "You can't just take her," his wife snapped. "This is my house." Michael turned then, fully. "It stopped being your house when you locked my child out of it." The words landed without volume, without drama. They didn't need either. Rosa stood slowly, her hands trembling but her voice steady. "I took pictures," she said. "I logged the times, the weather, how often." The stepmother stared at her. "You'll regret that." Rosa met her gaze. "I already did. Every night I watched." The doctor stood. "I'm required to report this," he said calmly. "This is not discipline." Michael lifted Lily gently into his arms. She stirred, eyes opening slightly. "Did I get in trouble?" she whispered. Michael's chest tightened. "No," he said firmly. "You didn't do anything wrong." Her face relaxed just a little. As they walked toward the door, the house stayed silent. No laughter, no explanations, no performance left to protect. Only the sound of rain fading into distance, and a story that could no longer be controlled from inside its walls. The hospital smelled like disinfectant and early morning. Lily slept beneath warm blankets, color slowly returning to her cheeks as fluids dripped steadily through a thin tube in her arm. Michael sat beside her, unmoving, his hand resting near hers without touching, as if afraid to wake her from something fragile. Rosa stood by the window, watching the storm finally loosen its grip on the sky. "She kept asking if she was ready," Rosa said quietly. "If she'd done it right." Michael closed his eyes. She never should have had to ask. When Lily woke, it was slow and careful. Her eyes searched the room until they landed on him. "Daddy," she whispered. "I'm here," he said immediately. She hesitated. "Is it okay now?" "Yes," he said. "It is." She thought about that for a long moment, then nodded, as if storing the answer somewhere safe. Later, when the social worker arrived, Michael listened without interruption. Investigations, temporary arrangements, follow-ups. He agreed to everything without hesitation. "What she needs most," the woman said gently, "is consistency." Michael nodded. "She'll have it." They didn't go back to the house that night, or the next, but a week later, Lily asked something unexpected. "Can we go there?" she said quietly. "Just once." Michael didn't say no. The house looked smaller in daylight. No storm, no rain, just quiet walls and clean windows and the door she'd stood behind so many times. A police notice still marked the entrance, thin and official. They walked to the back. The glass door stood where it always had. Lily stopped in front of it. For a moment she didn't move. Michael waited. She reached out and touched the glass. It was warm. She looked up at him. "I want to stand here," she said. "Inside." He nodded. "Then stand." She stepped back into the house onto dry floor. She didn't rush. She didn't check behind her. She simply stood. After a moment she turned toward the door again, not with fear but with curiosity. "It's raining," she said. "Yes," Michael replied. She watched the drops slide down the glass. "I don't like storms," she admitted. "You don't have to," he said. "You don't have to learn anything from them." She considered that. Then she smiled. Small. Real. They left the house without locking the door behind them. The new place smelled like fresh paint and pine trees. There were no rules posted on walls. No places she wasn't allowed to stand. That first night, when rain tapped softly against the windows, Lily moved closer to the glass. Michael watched her carefully. She looked outside. Then she turned back. "I choose inside," she said. Michael smiled, and for the first time, the choice belonged to her.